Imagine finding out that your 25-year marriage wasn't ended by a lack of love, but by a midlife crisis so cliché it felt like a bad movie script, only to realize that you held the keys to the entire kingdom all along. I sat across from the man I had built a life with, the man who had seen me through 3 pregnancies, 2 career changes, and the loss of my parents, and watched as he calmly explained that he just needed something fresher, something younger, and something that made him feel alive again. He looked me in the eye and told me he wanted a divorce because he had met a 24-year-old yoga instructor named Mia who understood his soul in a way I supposedly couldn't anymore. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, and I didn't beg. Instead, I waited for him to finish his little speech about finding himself before I delivered the one piece of information that would turn his entire world upside down and leave him absolutely speechless. Was I wrong for the way I handled the revelation of his betrayal? Or would you have done exactly the same thing if you found out your husband was trying to replace you with someone the same age as your eldest daughter? To understand how we got to that cold, silent kitchen table, you have to understand who Mark and I were. We met in our early 20s while working at a small marketing firm. He was ambitious, charming, and had a smile that could melt the coldest heart, and I was the organized, level-headed woman who kept his chaotic energy focused. We were a team from day one. When we got married, we had nothing but a shared vision and a few $1,000s in a joint savings account. I was the one who pushed him to start his own consulting business, and for the first 5 years, I worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat while he built his brand. I handled the books, I handled the clients, and I handled the home. We were happy, or at least I thought we were, as we raised our 3 children, Sarah, who is now 24, Leo, who is 21, and our youngest, Chloe, who just turned 18. Mark's business eventually took off, becoming incredibly lucrative, and by our 15th anniversary, we were living a life of luxury that neither of us had ever dreamed of. But as the money grew, Mark started to change. He became obsessed with his image, spending thousands on designer suits, a luxury sports car, and eventually a membership at a high-end wellness club where he met Mia. I started noticing the signs about 6 months ago. It began with late nights at the office that didn't result in any new contracts, and then there were the business trips to cities where he didn't have any clients. He started being overly critical of me, making little comments about my appearance, how I didn't go to the gym as often as I used to, or how I seemed settled in my ways. I'm 50 years old, and while I take care of myself, I'm not 24, and I never pretended to be. I thought it was just a phase, a bit of a midlife wobble that we would navigate together. But then I found the receipts. It wasn't just dinners, it was jewelry, a lease on a luxury apartment in the city, and a series of text messages that made my stomach turn. He wasn't just having an affair, he was building a secondary life. He was playing house with a girl who was literally the same age as our daughter Sarah. For weeks, I stayed silent, gathering my evidence and consulting with the best forensic accountants and divorce attorneys money could buy, all while he continued to play the role of the bored, dissatisfied husband at home. The night he finally decided to come clean started like any other. He came home late, smelling of expensive cologne and guilt, and asked me to sit down in the living room because he had something heavy on his heart. He went into this long, rehearsed monologue about how he felt like he was suffocating, how our marriage had become a routine, and how he deserved to be happy in the third act of his life. He actually used the phrase third act. He told me about Mia, describing her as a breath of fresh air, and someone who didn't carry the baggage of our decades together. He told me he wanted the divorce to be amicable and that he'd be generous with the settlement, but that he wanted to move out immediately to start his new life. He looked so smug, so sure that I would be devastated and helpless without him, and he even had the audacity to ask if I could help him pack some of his things so he could stay at Mia's place that night. So that is the situation I was in. After 25 years of loyalty and hard work, I was being traded in for a newer model and told to be grateful for a generous settlement from the very company I helped build. Before I tell you what I said that stripped the color from his face and what happened to his generous offer, I want you to pause right now and comment below. If you were sitting there, hearing your spouse tell you they were leaving you for someone half your age, what would your immediate reaction be? Would you fight for the marriage, or would you make them regret the day they met you? I really want to know what you would have done in my shoes. After he finished talking, there was a long silence. Mark was leaning back, looking almost relieved, waiting for my tears. Instead, I stood up, went to my desk, and pulled out a thick blue folder. I laid it on the coffee table and pushed it toward him. I told him that I had known about Mia for months, and that while he was busy playing Spiritual Awakening with a yoga instructor, I had been busy talking to the board of directors of his consulting firm. You see, Mark had forgotten one very important thing, because I was the one who set up the business structure 20 years ago, and because of the way we leveraged our joint assets for the initial startup loans, I didn't just own 50% of the company. I owned 1%. I held the controlling interest. I told him very calmly that I had already met with the board and informed them of his recent distractions, and the fact that he had been using company funds to pay for Mia's apartment and lifestyle, which constitutes embezzlement of corporate assets. The look on his face shifted from smugness to pure terror in a matter of seconds. I told him that if he wanted a divorce, he could have one, but it wouldn't be on his terms. I told him that I was firing him from his own company for cause, effective immediately, and that the generous settlement he mentioned was actually going to be the other way around. Since I had proof of his financial infidelity and the misappropriation of funds, I would be seeking the entirety of our shared liquid assets to compensate the company and myself. I told him that Mia wasn't in love with a 52-year-old man. She was in love with the lifestyle that my hard work provided, and I was curious to see how long she'd stick around when he was an unemployed man with a pending lawsuit and no access to the country club. He tried to argue, saying I couldn't do that, but I just pointed to the documents in the folder, the signed affidavits from the board and the bank statements he thought I'd never see. He went from finding himself to begging for his job in less than 5 minutes. I didn't budge. I told him to take his suitcase and go to Mia's, and that my lawyers would be in touch by morning. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. As soon as the money dried up and the legal trouble started, Mia disappeared. She didn't want a soul connection with a man who was fighting a legal battle over his own kitchen chairs. Mark moved into a tiny, depressing studio apartment, and our children, who were horrified by his behavior and his attempts to date someone their age, stopped taking his calls. I took over as CEO of the firm, a role I should have had years ago, and I've never felt more alive. I didn't need a 24-year-old to make me feel young. I just needed to get rid of the dead weight that was holding me back. He lost his wife, his children's respect, his career, and his dignity, all because he thought the grass was greener on the other side, not realizing I was the one watering the lawn the entire time. The moral of this story is that you should never mistake a partner's silence for weakness, and you should never forget who was there for you when you had nothing. If you build your life on a foundation of lies and betrayal, don't be surprised when the whole house comes crashing down on your head. Like this video if you were on my side, and think Mark got exactly what he deserved for his arrogance. Subscribe for more stories like this where the underdog finally takes charge. And please share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far? Or was this the perfect revenge? I'll see you all in the next story.